As we draw nigh unto you, we draw nigh unto God, draw nigh unto us. God, depart not from us. Depart not from us. Do not leave us, oh God. Whatever you do, don't take your spirit from me, but make your spirit manifest in this hour. Not for my will, not for my pleasure, not for my gratification, not for my glory, but for your glory, God. For your glory, God. For your glory, God. For your glory, God. God, you get the glory. You get the glory, the power, and the honor. You get the praise, for there's none like you. There's none like you. There's none like you in all the earth. There's no God like you, God. There's no God like you, God. You are the great I am. You are
I
the
gotta
God that
rewind
reveals.
this so that y'all can hear just a little bit more of what I heard. I'm on this good
If
old
you have an
Periscope.
iPhone or Apple product, swipe from the left to the right and click share for me. If you're confused and don't know what to do, just get a pen and pencil and piece of paper ready. Get it
Well,
handy, get it handy, get it handy, get it handy. I know y'all not used to seeing me in a robe. You're not used to me being in full clergy attire. I'm about to go into a sabbatical before tomorrow, and I have to get this thing off of me. I'll be very direct, very blunt, very straight to the point. And of course, as always, I will give Bible. I will give Bible. I will give Bible. I will give Bible. Now, as you have already came in, let me know where you're from so I can love on you. May, this is one of those scopes. I love you, sis. But let me know where you're coming in from so I can love on you and just tell you once again, God bless you. And then we're going to pray. I hope Prophet Marcus is on. If not, sir, please come back. I call you back. I really like it where can I get that press shawl from Israel, from the Brooks, New York. God bless you. Good, good, good. You don't want to log off. This is going to be really good for you because you're an intellectual as myself. I wish Prophet Taylor was on here. Can't wait to see you tomorrow in service. To God be all the glory. I'll be there. Uh, listen. I'm going to go ahead and pray and get that dead into this thing. Father in heaven, how I thank you, God. I thank you for all that you are. God, I pray even now in the midst of this anger, in the midst of this prophetic aggravation and
alright,
agitation, I
so
pray even now that you get the glory somehow,
prophetic
some way.
anger,
God, you
prophetic
get all the glory.
agitation.
I pray even now, God, that you bring understanding and a divine division even now in this hour. God, bring a divine division between the clean and the unclean, yours and those that are not yours. Make it very clear who's your friend and who's your enemy in this hour. God, show your
In
power,
this hour.
show your presence. Let your glory fall. Let your glory.
Well, I do want to finish listening to that, but I want to try to just share something right quick while it's on my mind. And I tell you, foolishness, man. There's so much that I want to say about that particular snippet, what was just heard, but I want to try to be quick because often I end up being too long and then this never gets shared or what have you. But just yesterday I had an incident where I was talking to this person who calls himself a believer. I'm not doubting that they are. I'm just saying, trying to lay some groundwork as to who this person was. I don't know them personally. I had just met them, but any person who believes on Christ gets my attention because I see them as potential family. So, but I just have this thought that keeps coming to my mind, and it just keeps coming, and it keeps coming. Not necessarily to my mind, but to my mind also. But I mean, situations just keep arising where some sayings from Scripture, from New Testament Scripture, just keeps popping up. And it has to do with old wine and new wine. It has to do with old wine and new wine. Now, I'm just going to be clear and straight to the point when it comes to this wine. There was a scripture that I came across in the New Testament, the teachings of Christ, where he said, "No one who has old wine prefers new, for they say that the old wine is just fine." Now, a lot of times it's not safe to go off into interpretation, but in my opinion, it's this notion is pretty straight up, is pretty clear. I don't know what most people think of the old wine and the new wine and the old wine skins and the new wine skins as, but I can tell you this: when wine skins did come up, what I understood to be talking about or being discussed is behavior. Behavior and the covenant that that behavior sits in, right? It's almost like the actions of a person and then the law system that says that those actions are either good or bad, right? Now, of course, in this sense, we're going to be talking about good, right? Because we're talking about the laws of God, okay? And what a lot of people don't take into consideration is that there is a new era. There's new times. There's, in the scriptures, it's called the new covenant, okay? Or the New Testament. There is an old and there is a new, right? Or better yet, because it's not just one or two covenants or two covenants. There is an old way, an old agreement between God and man set forth by God. And then there's a new agreement between God and man set forth by God. I can go further into that upon request, but just listen to this, all right? This is Matthew. This is just an example. Matthew, I'm reading from the New Living Translation. As a matter of fact, I'll read from King James, all right? But Matthew chapter 9, verse 14. Then came to him the disciples of John, saying, Why do we and the Pharisees fast oft, but thy disciples fast not? All right, it says, one day the disciples of John the Baptist came to Jesus and asked him, Why don't your disciples fast like we do and the Pharisees do? Verse 15, Jesus replied, Do wedding guests mourn while celebrating with the groom? Of course not. But someday the groom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast. Besides, who would patch old clothing with new cloth? For the new patch would shrink and rip away from the old cloth, leaving an even bigger tear than before. That's one analogy. Listen to this one. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the old skins will burst from the pressure, spilling the wine and ruining the skins. New wine is stored in new wineskins, so that both are preserved. New wine is stored in new wineskins. Now, it catches my attention that before that, what Jesus was talking about was fasting, right? Remember how it started off? The Pharisees asked him one day, the disciples of John the Baptist came to Jesus and asked him, Why don't your disciples fast like we do and the Pharisees do? All right? I don't know if we can draw this understanding that, fasting is an Old Testament practice. Not saying that it shouldn't be done right now. Definitely not saying that at all. But fasting is an Old Testament practice. And Jesus is saying there's a new way of doing things, right? Especially at that moment, right? Now, I do notice that he said that, when the groom goes away, then, those of the wedding party, they're going to fast and mourn, right? But at that moment, Christ was with them. But anyway, there was another scripture also that mentioned wine. Basically, this contrast between old and new wine, okay? And that keeps coming to mind because I'll just be honest and straight up. I see a lot of people that sort of love that old wine, right? And what I understand that old wine to be is human grit and human oomph and strife and that human desire and will and even ability to know the right way and to do the right way. And what is also a residual effect of that is they expect other people to learn the right way and do the right way as they have. All right, it's like, this is what should be done. It's the classic. It's almost every American. It's everyone with a success story. They want to tell you how they got there and want to tell you how you can also get there as well, right? It's this notion of, I know what to do and I'm doing it good and I'm doing it right. That means you can also, and you should. I understand that to be old wine, all right? The old wine. God gave out some laws saying this is what must be done. And this nation of people whom God selected, whom God decided to share these laws with, had thousands of years to practice these laws, to do what God has said. And there's been many stories in the scriptures where miraculous things happen because of people beckoning unto God under the terms of his law. Sacrificing as should be, giving offering as should be. And a lot of Periscope prophets and such, I hear a lot of people talking about, they always talk about the miraculous stories. Oh, how, so and so prayed and shut up the sky and it didn't rain for how many days. Then he prayed and it did rain, and the implication is that this man was so right with God that he got these powerful things to happen. You see, it's almost like know the right way, be the right way, and do the right way, and then you'll get what you want, or you'll get what's great. But there was another scripture that I came across, and I believe it was in Mark. I'm sorry, not Mark, but Luke. And which is another one of the Gospels. Let me see here. And look, it comes up the same way. All right, it's the same story, just a different gospel account. One day, some people, this is Luke chapter 5, starting at verse 33, New Living Translation. One day, some people said to Jesus, John the Baptist's disciples fast and pray regularly, and so do the disciples of the Pharisees. Why are your disciples always eating and drinking? 34, Jesus responded, do wedding guests fast while celebrating with the groom? Of course not. 35, but someday the groom will be taken away from them and then they will fast. 36, then Jesus gave them this illustration. No one tears a piece of cloth from an old garment and uses it to patch an No one tears a piece of cloth from a new garment and uses it to patch an old garment. For then the new garment would be ruined and the new patch wouldn't even match the old garment. 37, and no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the new wine would burst the wineskins, spilling the wine and ruining the skins. New wine must be stored in new wineskins. But no one who drinks the old wine seems to want the new wine. The old wine is just fine, they say. Right? No man also having drunk old wine straightway desireth new, for he saith, the old is better. I think it definitely feels better to learn something, get a functional understanding of it, and then function at a high level with that understanding and knowledge, and then achieve by that functioning. I think that feels very good. I think that that is just typical human accomplishment and being happy about what one has accomplished. Okay, coming to know what should be done, doing what should be done, and then getting great results because you've done what should be done and didn't do what shouldn't be done, so on and so forth. Right? But that is just problematic on so many levels. And I guess just the first one that I'm going to touch on, then I'm going to get off of this, is that it breeds arrogance. It breeds this sense of, I'm better because I knew what to do and I did better. So now that means anyone else who either doesn't know or know and doesn't do, basically anyone who doesn't reap or get the same results, then you are not doing it right. Then something's wrong with you. And you see, that's just not the gospel. That is not an element of the gospel message. Okay, an element of the gospel message is not that You're not doing it right, so you need to learn how to do it right. That is not an element of the gospel message. I'll go further into that at some point upon request, if that comes up or what have you. But I just wanted to get this thought off of my mind. I really wanted to do a quick little periscope, but a quick little scope, but I'm just not I don't know. There's something funny about Periscope. I can't really put my finger on what it is, but I hope that this little sharing gets out, touches, or gets to someone's ears, or makes sense to someone. I'm not saying these things or preaching these things, saying it's right and listen to it. All right. I'm more so saying this is what I've come to understand. You read these scriptures, and not just the ones that I've mentioned, because even just the understanding that I've shared about just these few scriptures, or just these couple of scriptures that I mentioned, doesn't come from just reading these couple of scriptures or just the chapters in which these scriptures are contained. This is an understanding that, first of all, has come from God. That's the best way that I can explain it. All right. It's not like I heard some voice or God sent me a letter or came to me in some supernatural form and told me these things, but it's a very inexplainable way that these understandings come to my mind. I hear people say things like the Lord told me, and it makes me very nervous. I don't like hearing it. I think it's used very loosely, but I think I'm becoming to understand why people say things like that. All right. So me saying it the way I said it is, I guess I'm saying the same thing. I'm just trying to explain it better. I didn't have a vision. I didn't have a dream. I didn't hear a voice, but as I read these scriptures, I received an understanding that I didn't have before. And here's the biggest thing, that I have an understanding that connects well with my consciousness. It connects well with my, basically, I don't feel any sort of, and it's not about feelings. You see, words are so, this is a difficult thing to explain, because it's not about how I feel. It's really not all about how I feel at all. It's really about, okay, my feelings, how I feel about it is one thing, but then another equally important factor or element or ingredient is, how does this, what I've understood and how I feel about what I've understood, how does it mesh and come together with the rest of scripture? Meaning, if I understand this notion here and I read scripture, at some point, if that notion clashes with another notion, all right, and I feel like I'm over here on this notion, I'm like, oh, I know that's what it is, so on and so forth. I don't, all right, and then over here, there's another notion that is contrary to this one, then it's issue, and I'm not afraid to discuss those issues. But that's the weird thing that's been happening with me. It's been, my understanding is being pieced together, notion by notion, all right, with the, you know how it is when you hear something and you just know it's right. I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like, you know how I think this may be a poor example, but you know how you hear a word, or maybe you write a word and you're like, that just doesn't look right, and then you write it again and you're like, oh, okay, that's the difference. It's kind of like that, something similar to that. It's just something really deep says that's wrong or that's right. Right. So that's one element. Just because I get that feeling, or it's not just me. I mean, I don't like trying to tell people how to live, what to do, but I really think that it's not all about how you feel about the notion, but it's how well does that line up with something else. It's almost like an investigator. I watch First to 48 a lot, right? And I watch the investigators at First to 48. That's a show that comes on A&E that's about homicides. But if a detective has an unction, oh, this guy is so-and-so, or this is that, right? He'll entertain it and feel that it's okay. But if he comes across something else that's contrary with that notion or understanding, well, then he looks for another notion that is more that is more congruent with what is known to be fact, say another person's testimony or what have you. In this sense, I hate to say unfortunately, but unfortunately, all we have is the scripture. If what we know and understand is contrary or conflicts with something else that is understood out of the scripture, it's important to get to the bottom of that and see exactly what's going on. But I said all that to say, I just wanted to share this little notion, this understanding. Like I said, I was going to do a scope, but it's just not real in Periscope land. At least it doesn't seem to be. Maybe I'll do the scope anyway. This isn't for any one person or two people in particular. This is for anyone who wants to hear it. If this doesn't make sense to someone, well, then I guess you can count me as crazy. But I would just offer I would say just think about it. Investigate it. Hey, tell me if I'm crazy or not. I don't know. But new wine needs new wineskins. This new wineskin, basically, I didn't get into that, but what it is I described the old. I think I did to a T. I hope you can remember. I hope it wasn't too long ago. But I described the old, all right, which is learning what's the right way, right? Applying the right way, getting good results from the right way. The new wine is this: knowing the right way, coming to understand what the right way is or the right thing to do is, right? And then coming to a realization that you can't do it. You can't do what should be done as a human being. There are limitations to the human to the human experience that greatly impairs the ability to do that thing that should and ought be done. But with, I'm sorry, not but with, even though humans are shrouded in sinful deeds or shrouded in just error, even though that's the case, God's grace and mercy still goes beyond those imperfections, goes beyond those mistakes, goes beyond whether or not a person never comes into contact with what is the right thing to do, whether a person comes into contact with it, try it, and fails at it, okay, what have you, whatever the case is, right? But this new wine says this right here: I understand what God's law is saying and what it requires. I also understand that I cannot meet the requirements in and of myself. And then comes this long process of an amendment of behaviors, a changing of mind about sin, a changing of mind about human ability, right? This is about total dependence on God through faith, not through actions. And that's a difficult thing to explain, because it's very difficult to explain because good behavior is something that is, or better behavior, right, is something that is a real part of the Christian experience, or rather the experience with coming to have a relationship with God through Christ, right? That is having a relationship with the one who created all and judges all through the attorney, through the one by whom we are forgiven, through Christ and his sacrifice. It sounds so crazy. It sounds sounds like space talk, but hey, challenge it. Read the scriptures, see what's up, see what the deal is. Anyway, that's a short sharing, and I really hope that it piques the interest of any aspiring believer, any doubting believer.